Karma for treason will sooner or later overtake all the cheaters. Ladies and gentlemen, I am glad to welcome you to my channel. The story of one betrayal and karma for it. A person attacked my wife, and I discovered that it was the man she was having an affair with. I retaliated by destroying both of their lives. Upon arriving at my home, I noticed that the front door was slightly open. My heart raced as I approached and pushed it open, only to find my house in complete chaos. Furniture was overturned, glass was shattered, and blood stained the walls. I panicked and searched for my wife, calling out her name with no response. I began to fear the worst. As I caught sight of her lying still on the ground, my heart plummeted. My wife was unresponsive, and there was a trickle of blood seeping from her head. I dialed 911 without hesitation and hurried to her side. I was frightened and disoriented as I waited for the ambulance to arrive. My heart pounded furiously, and I experienced palpitations. My palms were clammy and my breathing felt shallow. Though these sensations were typical for me, my chest felt constricted. This was a new experience for me. I wasn't accustomed to feeling this way. There were 3 potential explanations for my sudden physical symptoms. It could have been the result of an incredibly taxing day. Alternatively, I may have been consumed by fear. I attempted to regulate my breathing, but it proved difficult due to the lack of air in my lungs. My respiration became sporadic and uneven, akin to that of a recovering addict who... I couldn't believe this was happening. After all these years, why now? It took me several moments to finally regain my composure and concentrate. As soon as I regained my bearings, I recognized that this was not supposed to be happening. This sensation was not normal. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I called out hesitantly. It might have been too soon to make a loud noise, but I needed to determine if someone else was present. No one responded. "Hello? Is anybody there?" I waited calmly for a reply once more, but none came. I believed I heard footsteps, but I couldn't detect any additional sounds, regardless of how intently I listened. The paramedics arrived and immediately assumed control, whisking my wife away to the hospital. I remained in the midst of the wreckage, unsure of what to do next. My mind was overwhelmed with unease and inquiries. Who could have harmed my wife? Would she recover? What occurred here? As I sat in the hospital's waiting area, I couldn't help but reflect on how often I'd neglected my wife. I regretted every argument and every instance of annoyance I'd expressed towards her. All I desired was for my wife to recover and to have her in my embrace once more. The physicians eventually emerged and informed me that my wife would recover. Although she had suffered a severe concussion and some fractures, she would survive. A sense of relief washed over me, but it was rapidly replaced by indignation and exasperation. Who could have caused her harm? As the police arrived to take my account, I began to assemble the events. An intruder had broken into our house and attacked my wife. During their altercation, the intruder struck my wife on the head, rendering her unconscious. Prior to the police's arrival, the perpetrator had fled the scene. Over the following days, I remained at my wife's side as she recuperated. It was during this period that I recognized the extent of my love for her. I vowed to never overlook her again and to appreciate every moment we shared. As time progressed, the investigation into the assault continued. Eventually, the police apprehended the intruder, a young man with a record of aggression. The knowledge that the perpetrator would be held accountable for the harm he inflicted on my wife and home brought me a sense of relief. This event demonstrated that life can be unforeseeable, and it caused me to value my wife and family even more. During this challenging period, I was grateful for the support of my loved ones and the police. I was confident that we would persevere through this together and emerge more resilient on the other side. It was later discovered that the individual who attacked my wife was her former partner, whom she had never mentioned to me previously. The perpetrator had been stalking my wife for several weeks and had seized the opportunity to strike when he saw her alone at home. While sitting across from him in the interrogation room, I was stunned by his confession. He asserted that my wife had been unfaithful to me with him while we were dating, and that they had continued their relationship even after we married. My mind raced with feelings of betrayal and rage. How could she have done this to me? How could she have deceived me for all those years? I demanded evidence from my wife's ex-boyfriend, and he presented me with messages and photographs that authenticated his account. Devastated, I knew I had to confront my wife about her infidelity, but not without some evidence. I combed through our home, searching for any sign that could provide me with answers. It was only when I stumbled upon a locked drawer in her dresser that I found a clue. After picking the lock, I discovered a letter addressed to my wife from someone named G. The words were filled with expressions of love and longing, and my heart sank as I realized that my wife was carrying on an affair. I couldn't fathom how the woman I loved and trusted could betray me like this. My mind was in chaos, and I was lost in indecision. Should I confront my wife or try to ignore what I had discovered? Despite my desire to walk away, I knew I had to face her. When I arrived at the hospital, she was awake and conscious. I struggled to maintain my composure as I asked her about the affair. At first, she denied everything, but when I presented the evidence, she crumbled and confessed to it all. My world seemed to have flipped upside down. The woman I had loved and confided in had been deceiving me all along. I couldn't bear to remain with her any longer, and eventually filed for divorce while assuming custody of our children. It wasn't an effortless task to begin anew, but I knew it was the appropriate decision for myself and my kids. I had to work on trusting others once more, but it was a lengthy and challenging journey. Eventually, I acknowledged that I deserved someone better than an individual who could breach my trust so effortlessly. The marks from my prior marriage still lingered. A memory of the pain and treachery that I had suffered through came flooding back. However, before that, I sought vengeance against the person responsible for it. The individual had violated the woman I loved, and I was determined to make them pay. I bided my time for his release before I took action. It wasn't difficult to keep tabs on him, and as anticipated, I was waiting for him when he was released from prison. I had my plan in mind, and I trailed him back to his apartment and jumped him. Then he attempted to fight back, but I was armed with a baseball bat. I tried to beat him. I roughed him up a bit before eventually releasing him. When he began to yell at me, I warned him that if he ever hurt her again, I would never forgive him. He should have known better than to pursue another man's woman. As soon as he left, I felt my rage subside, and I decided to wait until tomorrow when he came home to beat him up again. I wished for him to comprehend the magnitude of the anguish he had inflicted on me and my ex-wife, if only for good measure. For several weeks, the situation persisted, and with each passing day, the discomfort became increasingly intense. My desire was for him to experience the same agony he had inflicted upon me, and I was unrelenting in my pursuit. On occasion, he attempted to defend himself, but his efforts were futile, only serving to further fuel his frustration. Over time, I became disoriented and lost sight of his actions or words, instead fixating on my mission to inflict the same level of anguish that I had endured. During one evening, he fell into a state of unconsciousness, and I found myself cradling his limp body in my embrace, his tear-filled eyes still moist. Assuming that he had internalized the message and my rage had been appeased, I remained heartbroken but resolute to move forward and safeguard myself from any additional harm. The process of divorce soon commenced, and it became evident that my spouse was not going to be cooperative. Despite her betrayal and the anguish she had inflicted upon me, I enlisted the services of a competent attorney and braced myself for a protracted and arduous struggle. The legal proceedings stretched on for months, with my wife tenaciously contesting every penny she could obtain. She resorted to portraying herself as the victim, casting me as a merciless fiend who was seeking to deprive her of everything she possessed. Anyone who was familiar with our situation could easily discern the truth. She was the one who had committed adultery and instigated the disintegration of our family. I was compelled to endure innumerable conferences and discussions, during which my wife's legal representatives endeavored to distort the facts and vilify me. It was a wearisome experience, and I frequently pondered whether it was worth enduring the strain and inconvenience. I was aware that I could not permit my wife to exploit me, particularly following her transgressions. I had to defend my rightful entitlements and ensure our well-being. Eventually, after what seemed like an interminable period, the divorce was resolved. My wife was not granted everything she had aspired to, and the verdict dictated that she would receive only a solitary payment. Since she had forfeited custody of our children, the divorce was ultimately concluded, and I was granted custody of our offspring. My former spouse was solely permitted to have supervised visitation with our children, and she was obligated to provide child support. Despite the agony and adversity of the divorce, I experienced a sensation of solace and resolution. I was, at last, liberated from the burden of a deceitful partner and prepared to progress with my existence. My ex-wife became progressively anxious, frequently contacting me in the dead of night, imploring me for financial assistance and asserting that she required it for medical care. I was cognizant that she was merely utilizing our children as a pretext to obtain my hard-earned finances. Initially, I attempted to persuade her to accept my offer of covering the costs of her medical treatment, but she incessantly demanded additional funds, and it became apparent that she was endeavoring to drain me of my resources. As a result, I resolved to take a firm stance. I informed her that I would only remunerate the necessary expenses and that I would not allocate any additional funds. Naturally, she was displeased with my decision and began issuing threats, declaring that she would take legal action against me and demand alimony. Nonetheless, I maintained my position. I was aware that I had an exceptional attorney, and I was confident that I would emerge victorious. Despite the finalization of our divorce, she endeavored to approach me for financial assistance. She would arrive at my workplace or contact me via phone, requesting a loan. However, I refused to capitulate. Observing her struggle was arduous. I was aware that she was grappling to make both ends meet, but I was equally cognizant that it was a consequence of her actions. She had betrayed my trust and was accountable for her predicament. Ultimately, I was content that I remained steadfast. I had succeeded in safeguarding my finances. It was a challenging endeavor, but it was a decision I did not regret. I had almost forgotten about the whole ordeal until the day that she broke into my home and attempted to pilfer some of my possessions. Without compunction, she assaulted me, and I barely managed to defend myself. I promptly contacted the police once I was able to, and they arrived and apprehended her. Despite her rage, she was powerless to harm me. Eventually, the police arrived, and she was arrested and brought to court. I initiated legal action immediately, and she was incarcerated on numerous charges. At present, I feel even more gratified. The two individuals who had incited my anger had their lives destroyed, and I was content. Reflecting on it now, I can discern how much more resilient and sagacious I have become as a result of the experience. It was not a facile ordeal. I take pride in the way I conducted myself and safeguarded my loved ones in the midst of challenging circumstances. Karma has happened! Ladies and gentlemen, do you think the OP did the right thing? Write your opinion in the comments. And I'm saying goodbye to you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the new video. Bye-bye.